Brothers and sisters of the infinite, welcome to REN-SHEN Half Spirit. This is chapter 17. The chapter is called REN-SHEN. Steve's meditation was better described as a waking sleep. His dreams over the next few months were periods of great instruction. Through his deepening meditative guidance from the one great ancestor, Bodhidharma, he became immersed in the styles of the four fighting ancestors via metaphysical interactions, real in every way except from an externally viewed perspective. The spirits would demonstrate movements which were representative of their martial specialty. The ensuing months saw Steve being tested in physical combat by these powerful spirits. Anyone watching would have seen Steve standing in contemplative meditation, yet within the blurred confines of his rapidly expanding conscience, he was in constant battle. The morning meditation sessions were still dedicated to his physical development. The presence of Pig was always confirmation of the importance of physical conditioning. After half a year, Pig had reached a weight of approximately 100 kilograms and remained contentedly perched over Steve's praying arms as he meditated every morning. What started as a small nagging reminder became an outright test of strength every morning. Steve was transformed physically. He was leaner than he had ever been in his late teens. He quickly learned food was no longer necessary in this new condition. His meditation and breathing routines learned from his very own ancestor had enabled him to nourish his body with nothing more than the air he breathed. Ming had only been momentarily present each day after the first few months. Rising tensions within China were causing great unrest, necessitating frequent consultation with other gods and immortals. Indeed, Steve learned Ming was an extremely powerful god of the highest order, being in charge of the lifespans of humans. As with all gods in his realm, his power came from a connection between primordial mystery and collective human beliefs. Ming's power was immediate, absolute, and native to the Chinese region. Yet the collective beliefs of humans were never quite the same since China's Cultural Revolution of the 1960s had gained momentum. Factors including the diminution of faith were impacting Ming's predominant ability as the arbiter of human life. Another force was interfering with his powers. Something was also happening with the spirits of the deceased. Many were not passing to the infinite, and even the ones who did were tarnished in ways never seen before. These were very concerning times for Ming. His demeanour had changed such that his uplifting energy and air of positivity had transformed into one of grave concern. From an outsider's perspective, it would have been easy to question how the director of destinies and taker of lives could have had such a light-hearted or jovial personality. But it was obvious to Steve something had changed about him. The name of Zhao Duyi had been mentioned more frequently. He was consolidating his power politically, and there appeared to be no stopping his ascension. Steve had asked Ming about this powerful man. Ming seemed quite disappointed in himself as he explained how Zhao Duyi entered his sacred sanctuary. He was not unlike you. He had exceptional ancestry, from the line of Emperor Taizu himself. He found this sanctuary by himself and entered without difficulty. He is now one of the few. He sought instruction from the great five ancestors, but I did not see his true agenda. His star shone brightly, and I allowed fate to prevail. Such was his power and knowledge of the infinite, I came to believe he would be the prophesied twice born, who had lived both lives, first as human and second as a god. The twice born will relieve me of my earthly duties. He deceived me. I didn't know the five ancestors rejected him. Even his own bloodline, the great Emperor Taizu, would not come to him. In fact, he was not here to learn their ways. He only wanted to learn my ways. How to control the three Deathbringers and take the lives of his enemies without even engaging in battle. Such power can only be wielded justly. There is talk of how he gained the power of the sword of his own ancestor, the great Emperor Taizu. And now he seeks to usurp my power and promises to destroy every child except for the firstborn here in the Celestial Empire. The one-child policy here in China makes him out to be a hero, but in fact, he is a genocidal maniac. He is indeed one of the few, not unlike the Kumicho you spoke of, and in truth, not unlike something you have the potential to become. He must be stopped. I initially thought you may be the twice-born, but I am presently feeling less sure of this. Even Ling believes there is a chance you may be him. The corruption true power brings will always be a risk to a potential candidate of one of the few, such as you, warrior. The closer you reach the gods, the more you must reach for the essence of your humanity. Steve felt the doubt and concern in Siming's voice. The threat was real and of worldly importance. He had no idea how, but immediately offered his help to the god before him. Sifu, you have all of my dedication. Just tell me what to do and I will fight for you. I can try to find Zhao Dui and destroy him before he takes the lives of so many innocents. I have been learning well from the 5 ancestors and I know I have improved. Siming replied, Warrior, I feel your sincerity and potential. I do not believe I have made a second mistake with you. You are indeed a warrior. I can see your spirit is bound to justice and war. You are not ready for battle. You have not found your sword, and you are not even ready to face my best student. I still see great potential in you, but potential is never enough. Where is your sword now, warrior? Steve wasn't sure if this was a rhetorical question from Siming. He answered, The sword is with the Kumicho of Okinawa. I will find it, I promise. Sifu, please tell me. You have always placed great importance on Ling's opinions. I am confused why you, a god, heed the advice of a teenage girl. Why do you value her thoughts so highly? Siming laughed in his familiar and comforting way. He said, Ling is the 3rd daughter of a 3rd daughter. She was abandoned in a cave in these mountains as a baby, placed next to the bones of the immortals as a sacrifice to the gods of the mountains and rivers. You think she's a teenager? She's in fact a leftover, 30 years old and already undesirable for marriage in the Celestial Empire. Why do I pay heed to her advice? I cannot say. In truth, she confounds me. I will say from the first time, she spoke as a young child. Her thoughts were timeless and beyond her age and time. She found her own way into this spiritual sanctuary. She moves freely between the natural and spiritual regions of the mountains. Her tea is the most expensive in the world and is consumed by only the richest and most powerful people of the world. She lives modestly and has more money than she needs. In truth, I do not yet know her name, as I am yet to learn yours, warrior. Steve resolved to learn as much as he could from the 5 ancestors. It seemed battle was imminent, and in any case, he would need to learn more in order to defeat Kumicho. He continued to train in his meditations. The mornings with Big Black Pig strengthened his physical condition. Steve learned the character of Pig indeed aligned itself with the nature of humans born in the Chinese year of the pig. Diligent, compassionate, realistic, and generous. Pig knew it was assisting and tried its best to help Steve's progress by not moving or farting too much when perched over his arms. The afternoon mind battles were intense. Steve was immersed in every nuance of the 5 ancestor spirits. The wings and beak of the white crane and the way to trap and attack became second nature to him. The powerful circular movements of Luohan, like a steel ball on the end of a chain, with energy summoned from his chi center and bounced off the ground to be infinitely multiplied through his body as it reached his opponent. The powerful strikes from the Emperor Taizu as his shortest attacking path sliced the air and defeated his enemy. The surprise of the golden monkey as he evaded every attack and then pounced on his assailant after hooking and using every part of his body for attacks. Steve learned to summon the power from the ground and take the energy from the infinite. His power was multiplying. His lion spirit remained ever present during these meditative training exercises. Steve had gained an understanding of the spirit in a way that only a few of his bloodline had ever fully comprehended before they passed to the infinite. He could move inside the lion spirit and use the power of his bloodline to assist against the 4 fighting great ancestors. After meditation sessions, he would summon his lion spirit and repeatedly move inside it. An orange glow developed around his entire body on those occasions, which was a phenomenal spectacle to behold in the evenings. Steve had taken to meditating inside the forest in the afternoons. The perfectly arranged trees felt as though they were standing together in meditation with him. Ming would often come to inspect Steve's progress in the afternoons and say, "Where is your sword now, warrior?" Steve would always reply, "The sword is with the Kumicho of Okinawa." Ming would laugh and shake his head. He said, "You're almost ready to face my best student soon." Steve remained permanently perplexed with the suggestion of another student. He had never seen anyone else being taught by Ming. The only person he could think of was Zhao Duyi, and he was very sure Ming was not referring to him. He wondered if Ming might summon a spirit to fight with Steve one day, and continued to train his mind and spirit in anticipation. Ling continued to perplex Steve, perhaps even more than before Ming explained her age and the curious way she came to the mountain. He once asked her how she found her way into the spiritual sanctuary. He recalled his own way of entering with the warrior's statue's permission. She shrugged her shoulders and said, "I just always knew where to go. The warrior in the cave has always stood aside for me." Steve was becoming increasingly aware of her unique nature. She remained unblemished of demons at 30 years of age. She moved between the spiritual and normal parts of the mountains effortlessly, and most importantly, confounded Ming. Steve had been on the mountain for 2 years when Ming asked yet again, "Where is your sword now, warrior?" Steve gave his standard response about Kumicho and Okinawa. Ming shook his head and advised it was time for Steve to fight his best student. The following day, Steve had completed his morning meditation with Pig and heard Ling and Ming's footsteps reach him. It was always a relief to put down Pig's 150-kilogram frame. After 5 hours of holding Pig every morning, Steve's body was conditioned beyond normal human levels. Both Steve and Pig were quite accustomed to the ritual of the exercise. Notwithstanding the obvious fondness they had for each other, it was always a relief to end the grueling sessions. Ming asked yet again about the location of his sword, much to Steve's exasperation. Ming didn't even wait for an answer when he thrust Ling in front of him. "It is time for you to fight my best student now," he said. Ling removed her hat and took off her green headscarf as her long black hair crashed over her shoulders. Steve had barely even thought of Ling as a woman before, and most certainly never thought of her as a fighter in any way whatsoever. Steve looked incredulously at both Ming and Ling. He said, "Sifu, I don't think it would be fair or appropriate to fight with Ling." Ming genuinely considered Steve's statement and replied, "Yes, I understand and agree with you. It would not be fair to fight with Ling. You have not trained as long as her, but I think you can still learn something from the battle. Hurry now." Ling had assumed a fighting stance and Steve hesitantly moved into a fighting position. By the time his feet locked into the ground, Ling had already launched an explosive kicking attack at Steve. He blocked her easily and paid attention not to hurt her with his blocking motion. In fact, it occurred to him that he never even touched her at all. She evaded his block entirely and landed a stinging strike to his face in the process. Steve smiled and was genuinely surprised and slightly embarrassed with her agility and precision. He went to punch her and she used the white crane technique to trap his hand and then golden monkey to attempt an elbow strike at Steve's face. Steve blocked the elbow just in time and returned with the piercing attacks of the Emperor Taitsu. Ling jumped backwards as the golden monkey and evaded his attack. Ming clapped and told them to stop. Ling saluted in Shaolin style to Steve and he returned the salute, along with a look of complete surprise. He'd never fought a woman or anyone with such precision and speed in his life. Steve scratched his head in a combination of awe and bewilderment. They drank tea together and discussed the latest activities of Zhao Duyi. Steve went to sleep that evening still thinking about Ling's fighting prowess. His face still throbbed where she had struck him, and he decided he would be a fool to underestimate her abilities next time. Over the ensuing months, Steve and Ling fought with each other every day. She used her lightness and small physical frame in the most amazing way. She gravitated towards the golden monkey in her physical style, but her mind projected all the ancestors. They had tested all of their physical fighting strategies against each other, and Steve found his rhythm quickly. One night Steve was awoken from his sleep by a loud explosion. He rushed to see Ming, who kept appearing and disappearing in front of him. Si Ming was concerned. He told Steve it was Zhao Duyi's minions trying to enter the spiritual sanctuary. I have fortified the sanctuary. They have tried and failed this time, but they will try again, he said. Steve realized he had not stepped outside of the sanctuary for well over 2 years. During the night, Ling found a chance to enter the sanctuary. She shakingly told Si Ming and Steve, I had to wait and hide until they gave up. If I tried to enter the sanctuary while they were near, they would have found the way in. There were demons of all shapes and sizes. I would have destroyed a few, but there were too many. As always, Si Ming carefully considered Ling's observations. He said, you must stay inside the sanctuary from now on. Zhao Duyi already knows you, and I suspect he would have an awareness of some of your abilities. It was nothing more than luck that the demons did not try to attack you and use you to enter the sanctuary. This must not happen. Ling's continued presence meant Steve had more opportunity to train with her. During one particular arduous session, Steve summoned his lion spirit for the first time. He immersed himself in the lion spirit and with his orange glow launched at Ling. She instinctively reacted and immersed herself in a green glow he had never seen before. Their battle was epic. With both of them stopping short of lethal attacks, Steve's abilities had multiplied exponentially, and Ling's abilities had also improved dramatically with the constant testing of wills. Si Ming would continue to ask Steve where his sword was when he bothered to watch their battles. Ling would sometimes laugh as she could feel Steve's exasperation with the repeated question. Steve and Ling grew to enjoy keeping company together. He eventually confided in the greatest loss of his life, his one true love, Megumi. He wondered about his son and tried to imagine what his 3-year-old child looked like. Ling reminded Steve how far his life had been displaced from that of a conventional existence. She dispassionately questioned his ability to be a loving father, in addition to being an immortal. Steve attributed her own abandonment as a child to the coldness she displayed about his ache for his son. After feeling somewhat put out by her response, he accepted her opinion as one based upon practical realities. He continued to pine for his dead wife and lost child, but eventually acknowledged his path was not a normal one. Ling and Steve would talk long into the night and discuss numerous issues ranging from politics to the healing arts. Steve would learn geopolitical trends from Ling, and they would discuss issues relating to their unique energies. Ling had developed great skills in the way of healing. She reminded him that if one can truly hurt an opponent, then one should also be able to heal. In battle, Steve's lion spirit would be met with Ling's bird spirit. She never understood it, but it came to her from a very young age. She had only recently been exploring her bird spirit during their fighting exercises. Unlike Steve's lion spirit, which was fully formed, Ling's bird spirit still appeared to be blurry on the edges, and it was difficult to discern what kind of bird it precisely was. Steve had the edge when he employed his lion spirit, but Ling's physical mastery remained incredibly challenging. Her skills in the way of the golden monkey were particularly complementary to her smaller physical frame. Steve found the combination of directness of the Emperor Tai Tzu in addition to the wing defenses of the white crane helped. Naturally, the circular motion of Lohan were also helpful. In fact, any attack other than golden monkey was advantageous to him. She had complete control when they both engaged the way of the golden monkey. During one particularly violent tussle, they both wrestled in an attempt to gain advantage. For the first time in many years, Steve experienced a very human reaction. He realized there was a sexual attraction to Ling when they both looked at each other in the tight embrace. He quickly flung her off of him and tried to process the sense of guilt which immediately washed over him as he thought of Megumi, his wife and one true love. Ling came to him that evening. She wore a thin, loosely fitting nightgown, and the candlelight behind her showed the silhouette of her petite body. She climbed into his bed and caressed his body. She kissed the scar on his chest and straddled him. She looked deeply into Steve's eyes and said, "Sex is the battle of stealing and strengthening. I give you my energy." Her eyes glowed an even brighter green colour as Steve reached forward and touched her legs and brushed his lips against hers. Her tongue briefly touched his bottom lip. Steve was surprised with the explosion in his physical desire for her. He no longer required food, yet his body's reaction was nothing more than primitive in its urges. There was little tenderness in their actions. Their lustful interaction was hungry, desperate, and intense. Both had desires, and the meeting of their bodies created a hue of green and orange inside the entire temple. They explored each other all night, and Steve stole every part of Ling and strengthened his energy with their joining of essences. Steve awoke the next day feeling invigorated and the closest to being a human being for the first time in well over 3 years. Ling later explained the Taoist theories in relation to sexual alchemy, how the union of essences created Jing, which could be converted by the man into Qi and replenish his life force. Whatever it was, it reactivated Steve's life force, and the lustful joining of energies and essences over the ensuing weeks instilled a new strength inside Steve, so his command over his lion spirit was becoming more nuanced in unexpected ways. He could snap the lion spirit into action instead of summoning it. The activation of his energy was more immediate. It felt such that the reconnection with his humanity had inexplicably given him more control over the energy forces within. Ming had noticed the change in Steve and was well aware of the energy and essence exchanges taking place between the pair. During one training session where Steve had activated his lion spirit, again Ming asked, "Where is your sword now, warrior?" Steve had reached the end of his tether on the persistent question. It reminded him of his helplessness with the things he had loved and lost. It reminded him of the questions he was still unable to answer. He engaged his lion spirit and drew the great 5 ancestors in his mind in an incoherent rage. The orange glow around him began to flash intermittently, and then the colour changed into the colours of the fighting ancestors, yellow, white, red and gold, until an explosion of orange energy shot out of Steve's chest scar. Steve turned to Ming with his eyes now emitting a fiery orange glow and said in a terrifying voice which thundered throughout the sanctuary, "The sword is here," as he pointed to his heart. Ling was visibly shocked, and Ming appeared almost drunk in surprise. Steve had transformed. His eyes were not human, and the boom of his voice shook them both. Steve noticed the quizzical looks on their faces and settled his spirits so he could assume his normal form again. Ling had her hand over her mouth. It was clear she had never encountered such a transformation before. Ming was euphoric as he seemed to absorb the new energy source emitting from Steve. He laughed and then disappeared from where he stood. He reappeared directly in front of Steve and placed his hand on Steve's shoulder. He looked Steve in the eyes and said, "I was wrong about you. I said you were neither man nor God, but I can see now you are in fact both man and a god. Your lion spirit is also so completely linked to you that it is difficult to distinguish between you and your spirit. The spirit of the great 5 ancestors are now also wholly inside you and at your command. I now know your name. You are REN-SHEN Half Spirit." Oh my God. Oh my gods. Oh my gods. Ming. REN-SHEN Half Spirit. Another god in the spiritual sanctuary. Steve had transformed. All right, let's work our way through this one. He'd been training very hard. 3 years had passed. Pig was 150 kilograms. Do you imagine carrying 150 kilograms over your arms every day, every morning? Lazy 4 hours of that. Not bad. We found out about Ling, third daughter of a third daughter. The third daughter in China, back in the time when there was a one-child policy. Let's think about that for a moment. What does that mean? It means health benefits don't exist for the child. It means parents, nowadays we hear about social status, social credits and whatnot, but back then it just meant the parents lose their jobs if they're working for the government. Huge discouragement to have a kid, have a third child. Second was bad enough. Third was life-shattering. If it was a son in China, we've got a disproportionate ratio of males to females over there. It hasn't balanced out because for one reason or another, people don't seem to want their daughters in China. And when you're up to a third daughter, there's a strong chance she's going to be given up, sent away somewhere, or killed. It sounds horrific, but there was an era, and if we're talking mid-90s, which we are about at this point, then yes, I'm sorry to say, quite a real outcome. So Ling was not considered a very desirable child to have, and so abandoned, and perhaps used as a sacrifice in the mountains of Wu Yi, dedicated to the immortals. I talked about them briefly in the last chapter, in the last video we made, so I won't go there again. But we also found out that Ling's 30 years old. She's not 15 or something. Unblemished. Oh, what a chapter. Come on, goosebumps. For me anyway, I loved it. That was fun. I want to see that. I want to see that in a film. Come on, don't you? If you do, you know, let's hear about it. So, Ling was thrown in front of Steve, and Siming said, I think you're ready to fight my best fighter now. Steve was a bit shocked. He was fully annoyed with the questions that he'd been having in his mind. These questions about where is your sword? And, you know, Siming was relentless. He kept asking him, where's your sword? It's with the Kumicho in Okinawa. It's with the Kumicho in Okinawa. Enough. He got fed up, didn't he, eventually? Sick of that. Anyway, he asked him, where's your sword? Same ridiculous answer. Threw Ling in front of him and said, right, fight my best student. Steve looking at this little girl, thinking, yeah, oh, how do I be nice here? Try and show a little bit of chivalry, maybe. That's what I'd be thinking anyway. What are we going to do here? Kill this poor little thing? She probably weighs 40 kilos. For the Americans, that's like 500 pounds. Maybe not. Let's see. So they go into battle. She throws a few kicks at him. Steve blocks. He says, right, I've got this, easy. The kicks were pretty good. He blocked, and then he realized he didn't actually touch her. Not even any contact whatsoever. She's that maneuverable in the sky, no less. Wow. He's fighting away. She lands a good one on his face. He copped it. She was very good. Very good. Siming's best student. There we go. So, over the months, we had an attempt to break into the spiritual sanctuary. Ling was told to hang around. They saw more of each other. They trained more. Steve would meditate in the mornings with Pig. He'd go into the forest and meditate with the trees in the afternoons. All in formation. Beautiful. What a beautiful place to meditate in that forest. Amazing. So, all the trees neatly arranged. They're just working there, meditating with him, I reckon. So, the guilt took over his mind a bit when he realised there was a bit of a sexual attraction to Ling. Awkward. A little bit awkward. So they're fighting, and then he's thinking, she's actually not too bad. She's a bit of an all right. So she visited him one night. Truthfully, I was keen on exploring this aspect in Kung Fu, and if you talk about Qi and you get into the more esoteric aspects of it, the idea of being able to create Qi, this life force, this energy, through sex, through sexual encounters. There is a lot of research on this matter and a lot of beliefs about it. I'll let you look it all up. But Jing is a key word, and Qi is obviously another word. Sex is another word. You can look it all up and realize that there's some processes that the martial artists, the Chinese martial artists, believe in. And it ties in with all the traditional Chinese medicine and meridians and all sorts of things. And Ling is quite well versed. She seemed to know a little bit about sexual alchemy, which is part of that process, and you know, the conversion, in a sense, of, you know, going from sex to energy and life-giving forces. So that's another thing you could look at, which is quite interesting. And this is the true bits, not the story bits. So they did have their encounter. And then for whatever reason, at one point, right near the end of that chapter, Steve was asked, "Where is your sword now?" And Steve had just lost his mind over this issue. Enough was enough. Everything got to him. He just said, "That's it. Enough. Stop asking me this question." And then something happened. He was that in touch with his lion spirit. He knew it all. He understood how it all worked. He was one with the lion spirit and the 5 ancestors. Everything happened, and in one exquisite moment, he channeled them all. And somehow, everything happened. The bright orange pulsed out of his chest. The big REN-SHEN, he was born. And Ximing lost his mind. It was like, imagine when a god feels a birth of another god. It was intoxicating for him. He was drunk. It was that amazing for him. And then he just looked and understood completely. And he said, "You're not a man or a god, nor a god. You're both." Which is quite unique. I mean, the last time we heard of that, there was this guy with a beard, ended up on a cross. It's called Jesus. So there's a concept of duality here. We've got Steve as a human. He is a man. And then we've got REN-SHEN as a god. That's pretty deep. Let's have a think about that. We might have some fun with that along the way. But my dear friends, that was chapter 17 of REN-SHEN Half Spirit. That was called REN-SHEN. That's the birth of the legend. I hope you enjoyed that. I really enjoyed writing that. It was a ball for me. I really enjoyed immersing myself in the Kung Fu, in the mystical aspects, in the esoteric aspects associated with martial arts, with Chinese martial arts. And then just leaping into spirituality a little bit, just a bit, just for a taste. We are nearing the end of this book, my friends. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm deeply immersed in the second book as we speak, so it's just great coming back to some of these chapters. So that was a real fun one for me. I hope you enjoyed it anyway. I will see you again shortly with the final chapter, I believe. So hang in there, my friends. We just saw the birth of a god, REN-SHEN Half Spirit. What does it mean? We know. Man, God, REN-SHEN. Can we see it? Let's have a look. REN-SHEN, man, God. He just got created. He's got a purpose, and justice is his middle name? Maybe. No, it's not, but it is his purpose. See you soon to find out what happens next.